Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The suffering death of Queen Victoria. One of the most iconic queens throughout history is Victoria, whose reign was known as the Victorian era. It was a huge period of change throughout the UK, and was also seen as a period of great expansion for the British Empire. She was the Queen, but was also considered the Empress of India, and ultimately she reigned for a colossal 63 years and 216 days, which at the time was the longest of any previous British monarch. She was a woman who suffered, though, with her health, and also with depression following the death of her beloved husband Albert. However, on the 22nd of January 1901, at the age of 81, she passed away inside of Osborne House, her beloved residence on the Isle of Wight. But what is the story of the suffering death of Queen Victoria? The year 1900 was described by Victoria as her horrible year. Britain had been fighting in the Boer War, and the loss of this caused her stress. Also, the heir apparent, her eldest son Edward, was shot in an assassination attempt when he was passing through Belgium. Her eldest daughter Vicky, the Dowager Empress of Germany, was also very sick and had been diagnosed with breast cancer, which was spreading quickly around her body and to her spine. This caused Victoria great upset. But then another son, Alfred, the Duke of Edinburgh, passed away. He was a man who smoked heavily and died from throat cancer. But this loss upset Victoria greatly. The English royal family was surrounded by more death as her grandson, Prince Christian Victor, passed away from fever in South Africa. But then Lady Church, Victoria's best friend, died in her sleep whilst visiting Osborne House. Victoria was known for having serious bouts of depression, but she was not herself. She was not eating as she had done, and she lost a significant amount of weight, which worried the doctors and her family. She eventually was bound to a wheelchair, and she suffered with her eyesight and bouts of delusion. Victoria was now an old woman, and was beginning to come to terms with her age. She said, "Another year has begun. I'm feeling so weak and unwell that I enter upon it sadly," showing how depressed she was, but within 3 weeks of this she would be dead. Victoria died on the 22nd of January, and then Osborne House was then placed on a strict lockdown. No one was allowed to leave as the Queen had died, and the phone lines were taken down, and a crowd had gathered around the entrance gates. A bulletin board was placed outside which read, "Osborne House, January 22nd, 6:45 p.m. Her Majesty the Queen breathed her last at 6:30 p.m, surrounded by her children and grandchildren." The news then travelled very quickly, and most people had only ever known Victoria as their queen. But because she had reigned for so long, no one knew how to plan a state funeral. Now it was clear that she had been ill for a while, and that the public had been told she was not ill, but doctors knew that she was dying. James Reed, who looked after her health for 20 years, knew she was about to die, and he tried to inform the other royals that she was slipping away, but he could not convince them that this was occurring. It's not completely known what killed Victoria. She was suffering from confusion and delirium, as well as other problems including rheumatism, which affected her legs and her mobility, leaving her wheelchair-bound. Her eyesight was bad, and she had cataracts, but this would have been distressing for the Queen. These conditions, though, would not have killed her, but could have led and contributed to her poor moods. She complained in the last few months that she was feeling very sick and unwell, but as January 1901 continued, things got worse and she became more dazed and confused. She did say to her doctors that, "I should like to live a little longer, as I have a few things to settle," and this shows that she wanted to live longer. But her spirit quickly left as her final days came. Following the 17th of January, things went very downhill as Victoria suffered from a stroke. This could have killed her instantly, but Victoria survived the initial one, but then suffered more. She began in more pain and more delirious, but following these, the royal family was summoned to come to the Isle of Wight immediately, as the Queen was on death's door. Preparations were being drawn up for her successor, and the government made plans to pause as the Queen could not effectively carry out her duties in her final days. The royal family was gathered in Victoria's small bedroom at Osborne House, and along with them was the Bishop of Winchester, who prayed with them, and each family member said their final words. Priests continued to sing hymns and chant prayers by her side, and Kaiser Wilhelm from Germany even arrived, along with other grandchildren of Victoria. The Queen was conscious, but she could not see, and she was surrounded by her closest family. Each one of them kissed the Queen's hand, and they said their goodbyes in their own way. The changing and singing continued, and in an attempt to rouse the Queen from her bout of poor health, but this did not happen. Many historians believed that the strokes she suffered caused her death. However, others considered that a short and painful illness was responsible for the death of Victoria, such as a cerebral hemorrhage, but her health would never recover, and she would not get better. The Queen looked thin as she was not eating, and grew tired and confused a lot of the time, but this could have been a sign of her old age. When the moment of death came, she was not on her own, and she was surrounded by the love of her family, many who had come from Europe to see her. But following her death, there was a huge amount of confusion regarding her funeral. As she had reigned for so long, there were no people around to plan the state funeral or understand the procedure as to what should happen for this. Because of this, there was a significant amount of panic. Kaiser Wilhelm also ordered a death mask to be cast of her face, but Victoria did not want this to happen. During the funeral preparations, the Duke of York was taken very ill by some form of pestilence, but humorously, the royal undertakers arrived from London to the Isle of Wight to prepare her body and to take it back to London. However, the undertaker forgot the very coffin which was intended to carry her coffin. Because of this, there was further delay, and a coffin for the Queen was built by a local carpenter, who then took the wooden box to Osborne House. Victoria's doctor, during this time, along with her dresser, prepared the body for her coffin, but they refused to embalm the Queen. Instead, they threw charcoal around the floor of the coffin to stop the smells, and also absorb any moisture. Her hair was cut, and she was laid out in the coffin, and she was dressed in a white silk dressing gown with a garter ribbon and a star. But her wedding veil was also placed over her face. The new king, along with the Kaiser and royal duke, then came into the room to lift her body into her coffin. Along with her remains, one of her husband's dressing gowns and a cast of his hand was placed in, along with a picture of her close friend John Brown and a local of his hair. Now also John Brown's mother's wedding ring was placed on Victoria's hand, symbolising the love she had for Brown. Her coffin was then sent on its journey to London and was given a guard of battleships and cruisers across the Solent. It had a huge military procession, and later a small funeral would occur in the mausoleum Victoria had built for Albert at Frogmore. Her body was lowered into the vault as Kaiser Wilhelm II and King Edward VIII knelt beside it. But this was a striking end for Queen Victoria, a woman who was at the time the longest reigning royal to rule over Britain, and her final moments were painful for her, but they were also filled with love. She was surrounded by her family, which must have been the most important thing for her, considering that despite all she achieved, she loved her family more than anything. Her final moments as she passed were filled with love. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.